Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, February 25th, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, well, we're going to continue with part two in my series looking into the accounts of the quote unquote giants or large hominids, I like to call them, international. And we're going to go a little south of Europe now and go down into Africa. And Chris Leslie has this divided up into a couple things like Africa, South Africa. He's got a couple of different countries in there too. He might cover one or two, but in any case, like, and Egypt's a separate thing, so it's quite a few accounts in Egypt just alone. So we're going to cover that in a different video, probably the next one. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But these accounts from Africa are very interesting to me, especially this first one here. Again, with these different kind of configurations of the skull types are just so interesting because, as we saw in the Americas with the horned skull types and the Adena with their vaulted cranium, and we heard of others with elongated sort of dolichocephalic skulls, long type skulls in the back. And it's just, again, with these different types of humanoid creatures in the past, which, different types of skeletal anatomy that are just very strange. And we heard about that in the Americas, certainly. And just to recall the Watussi people again, and this time I'm very bad at this, but in this video I'll include a link to this video. You want to take a look at it. This travel film put on video here, very interesting. Here's the king of the Watussi, chief of the Watussi people here, and here's some cattle here with giant horns, and he's like, he's like above these cattle are pretty big animals here, and other people in his class, in his caste, I guess there, and it's just look at their interesting haircuts. The heads of these people are slightly dolichocephalic, slightly elongated as well. I mean, here you have living proof of the giants, their DNA being surviving into modern times. It's just direct proof of it here, and it's just nobody wants to talk about it. Of course, there are obviously these giant skeletal remains found with seem to be relatively normal human skeletal anatomy, although much larger. But there was all these other sort of cranial types, and this first article on Chris Leslie's Greater Ancestor site here talks about these Boskop skull types found in Africa. And it's just interesting what they look like. It must have looked very strange. So they're doing a comparison of restoration of Boskop skull next to a modern man, right? Modern human skull. And it's quite different. We'll take a look at this article, read it right here, and learn about it. About Boskop Man. The first Boskop skull was discovered in 1913 by Frederick Fitzsimmons. More skulls were later found by other paleontologists. Scientists say the Boskops were similar to us, but had small, childlike faces and huge melon heads. The science writer Lauren Isley described them in his book, The Immense Journey, The Man of the Future with the Big Brain, the Small Teeth. He lived in Africa. So it's just interesting that somebody would have that sort of take on it. It's interesting how all these different ways of interpreting these things are thought about. And, of course, we can do our own thinking about it as well. Just we know from the accounts in the Americas here of all these different odd skull types. Well, add another one to your list over here in Africa. Here, these childlike faces and giant melon heads sort of remind me of the what sort of bastardized term from the Star Trek original series, the ass head aliens. There, I think they were called the Metrons or something like that, but I just forget now. But in any case, very odd skull types again to be found in Africa here, and just so many races of odd humanoids around in the past, just like in a Tolkien book. His brain was bigger than your brain. His face was straight and small, almost a child's face. When the skull is studied in projection and ratios computed, we find that these fossil South African folk, generally called Boskop, quote unquote, or Boskopoids, quote unquote, after the site of the first discovery, have the amazing cranium to face ratio of almost 5 to 1. In Europeans, it is about 3 to 1. This figure is a marked indication of the degree of which face size has been, quote unquote, modernized and subordinated into brain growth. Their cranial capacity was 1800 cc. Low estimate 1260 is average. So, much larger brain capacity compared to modern humans who only average 1400 cc. Too high an estimate. Just as we're smarter than apes, they were probably smarter than us. Robert Broom gives the cranial capacity of the first Boskop skull, discovered, I guess, as 1980 cc. Again, a low estimate. Chris L. Leslie, the cranial cast, as thus restored, displaces about 1960 cc of water. So yeah, but also again, these might not be adults; it may be children. Again, mistaking these large skull remains, or whatever, as children. Not knowing the actual history of growth of the skeletal anatomy of these odd humanoids. How could you make these claims? So can't apply us to something that's different than us completely. So there's exceptions to it, obviously. So they have to be considered in a different way and thought about in a different way as well. If we add 20 cc as a correction for the slight crushing on the left side, we get for the corrected cranial capacity of the Boskop skull a very remarkable figure of 1980 cc. The evidence afforded by the Boskop skull of a new species of primitive man, Homo capensis, published in 1918 by Robert Broom. The below photos of the Boskop skull taken from the evidence afforded by the Boskop skull of a new species of primitive man, Homo capensis. Okay, so they showed a picture of it here from this 1918 book. Childlike face, huge cranium, big brains. The origins of past human intelligence, our big brains, our language ability, and our intelligence makes us uniquely human. The human-like creatures called Boskops flourished in South Africa. They possessed extraordinary features, 4 brains roughly 50% larger than ours, and estimated IQs to match, far surpassing our own. This is where the problem lies for me, because I've seen some recent research done on animal research, behavioral research, and animals are a lot smarter than we think they are, and have capacity to memorize many things, or 10,000 things, just common pigeons. These are not even the higher animals or whatever, but they're much smarter than we think. And it seems to be that it doesn't have anything to do with size in particular at all, but it has more to do with the structure. But it could be that the structure of these brains were different in some sense, more evolved. They say that dolphin brains are more evolved and more complex and seem more evolved than our brain. And they could quite possibly be smarter than us. They just don't need to be, because they got the ocean living there, and all they really need to do is sort of play and eat and you know uh, procreate, and that's about it. And they don't need spears or bows and arrows or submarines or boats or anything, planes. They don't need any of that stuff, so they don't need to do anything with their brains more than just do those things like an animal does and have fun with their very less complicated lives than ours. So who's more evolved? A prominent neuroscientist, Gary Lynch and Richard Granger, compare the contents of the Boskopoid brain and our own brains today and arrive at startling conclusions about our intelligence and creativity. Connecting cutting edge theories of genetics, language, memory, learning, and intelligence, Lynch and Granger show the implications of large brains for a broad array of fields, from the current state of the art in Alzheimer's and other brain disorders to new advances in brain based robots that see and converse with us, and by means with neural prosthetics, replacement parts for the brain are being designed and tested. The authors demystify the complexities of our brains in this fascinating, accessible book and give us tantalizing insights into our own humanity in its past and its future. So, this comparative analysis, what does it really say? If you're following the mainstream narrative, you're going to follow through that thread and everything. You're going to be wrong about a lot of your conclusions about these things. So, I thought it worthwhile saying all that stuff because, these people are starting with a premise that's basically with mainstream type research, which sometimes proves points and sometimes doesn't prove anything. But let's take a look at this. An African sword or a spear, or in my opinion, could be something entirely different altogether, but I'm always thinking outside the box. Here's Chris Leslie with this display here, this giant sword here. It seems to be as big as he is. First of all, I do not believe this is the largest sword that exists. Actually, I think there might be hundreds of swords once owned by greater humans and Nephilim ancestors that possess giant swords that exist today. Goliath possessed such a sword. A great sword like this would be a symbol of power and would be a well revered trophy. Friend or foe, the sword from this famous battle would be so sought after anyone stumbling across it would hide it into their private collection and it wouldn't just disappear. So he quotes some Bible stuff. I'm not going to go into it at all here, but show the swords here in the display cabinet here. This weapon is without a hilt, handle, or guard. It is 6 feet in height and behind glass. This sword blew my mind. It is the largest sword in the museum's collection. If the hilt and handle was smaller than the Claiborne, it shows some bigger swords. We're not going to go there, and was only added 2 feet, we'd have an 8 foot sword. If the handle was 1 foot, it would mean that the sword was a one handed sword, a 7 foot one handed sword. If the hilt, handle, and guard was an added 3 foot, which would not be accessible, we would be talking about a 9 foot sword. What if this is a giant spear? He postulates here, Chris. This would be even more remarkable and would not be the largest known sword, would be the largest known spear, which I'm glad Chris thinks outside. He does some more Bible stuff here. This not weapon is that is now residing in the Raw Museum is not the Goliath sword. And it's obviously too large to be a spearhead, right? This weapon was in an area where no one was. I waited and waited until I saw someone pass by to get them to take a picture. Yes, this picture was taken by a random stranger with my camera. It resides in an away corner of the museum on the fourth floor. In checking the label for the sword, there must have been some kind of cross reference or mistake because this weapon's curiously is labeled spear. Okay, so maybe it is a spear shape or a spear head. Possibly the tang doesn't seem long; it seems more like a spearhead tang, in my opinion. But then again, this could be a part of some entirely different contraption altogether that we can't imagine what it might have been. So some sort of complex mechanism or something like that, for all we know. But if it is, it seems to me, because spears are designed with these short tanks like this, but not one like this. But who knows what the hilt was and the actual handle was and everything else. Missing, maybe. But to wield a sword that big or even a spear that big, you have to be absolutely huge for it to be practical of practical use. And I don't think people in the past did a lot of wasting time with doing impractical things just for kicks or whatever it is. Maybe emperors and kings or whatever, but not necessarily back in times in Neolithic times or anything like that. Femur of 8-foot giant Heidelberg man, South Africa. Femur of 8-foot giant Heidelberg man found in South Africa compared to normal-sized women's femur. Professor Francis Thackeray shows Michael Tellinger and friends the rarely seen part of the upper leg bone with hip joint of a giant that would have stood about 12 feet or 3.5 meters tall. This bone has been in the vaults of the medical school at Wits University, Johannesburg, since the early 1960s, when it was found by miners in a mine in northern Namibia. It is one of the most precious and rare specimens available today that clearly indicate the existence of giants in southern Africa more than 40,000 years ago. Michael shares this video clip as part of the continued research into the origin of humankind, the vanished civilizations of southern Africa, and the strange anomalies we discover on this journey. And anybody who's been a subscriber to my channel for a long time might remember a video of me ambushing Michael Tellinger on Coast to Coast, which was taken down by YouTube at the request of George Norrie. Because I ambushed Michael. I like Michael. I like his research, and I like everything he does, really. I like him. He seems like a real nice guy and all this kind of stuff. But he goes around saying that, Southern Africa there, South Africa there, is with the stone circles there, is the largest area of ancient stone constructions on the planet. And I beg to differ. I say northeastern North America is, okay? And here's the train. Sorry, folks. And I say it's the northeastern part of North America. And I'm absolutely convinced 100% that it is. And also built by giants, okay, or large hominids, like Jim Vieira believes, okay. Take that all into account, including Canada, not only, New England and New York, but if you want to know if I'm qualified to say anything about it, well, here's me and Jimmy up on Mount Ephraim in Vermont with these stone walls built on nearly a sheer face of the mountain here, 1,800 feet up near the summit of Mount Ephraim.
Guys, Mike
Me, Jimmy, and his dog.
Jimmy and I are on the top of Mount Ephraim,
Sorrow.
and we're looking at stone wall constructions throughout the whole place over here. It's
okay, and there's a couple of shows that Nori didn't take down. The other one he took down was with L.A. Marzulli when I ambushed him on his show and said that the giants weren't cannibals, and the people of Lovelock Cave, their moniker, their nickname was the tool eaters, an aquatic plant. And these giants, being that they had bigger bodies, might have had longer intestinal tracts and more able, like a cow or some animal that digests vegetable material, because they have huge intestinal tracts. Okay, these giants might have had longer intestinal tracts and able to digest plant food better than we could. We're just a smaller version of some giant species of the past. But here's Jimmy and I up on Mount Ephraim here. I'm not just a guy who's, sitting at a computer in my mother's basement or something like that. I was out there and I've done that. And I've come up with some very interesting conclusions about the stone walls. Here's me on Coast to Coast with Michael Cremo. Okay, here's me on Coast to Coast with Dr. Ken Fader, and look at this beautiful effigy here. You see the eye in this horned serpent effigy. That's what the mythology of the Algonquin people talk about. The horned serpent is part of their folklore, part of their mythology. You can find these horned serpent effigies all over the place, and on my channel here, the eyes in the wall is my research, my pet project. Okay, the eyes in the wall can be seen with these things everywhere, and all the stone walls in the northeast and part of North America are serpents. And that's my research, folks. Nobody's come to that conclusion, but it was part of the research that Jimmy and I was up there in Springfield, Vermont, on its own amazing area, brought to my attention that there's something in the walls there, some sort of artwork, and the walls on his property are amazing. Just like a stone man coming through the walls there, and a horned serpent, double-ended serpent effigy, and just amazing artwork in the walls that Jimmy brought to my attention. And we actually found what I call the stone wall code. If you haven't seen these videos, there's a playlist on my channel, okay? And these are far more, the stone walls of New England and New York and northeastern part of North America are far more interesting in their construction everywhere, and the additional things to go along with it. There's chambers and effigies and cairns and all these other serpent walls with scales and you name it. All right, so far more interesting than South Africa, yet this area of the world gets so little attention. It's just baffling to me why my videos, so you can see all these wonderful things. I show just as much stuff as Michael Tellinger shows and whatever. Nobody watches them at all. So not interesting at all to them. But, as long as you're part of megalithomania and all kind of stuff, it's just, I suppose it's, more interesting that way, which is ridiculous. It doesn't matter what Michael Tellinger says. He's wrong. And, you can hear what George Norrie says about me after he hears me speak with Michael Cremo.
Large humanoids, and don't forget we had the reports of Tabaka from the failed Spanish Barbades expedition, where he went through the interior. He saw like small prehistoric type men, and his quote was, "If they were not large, our fears made giants of them." But that's just some of my own research. But it's just interesting, like you said, in lieu of the latest find in the Philippines, there of all these people of different morphology, different phenotype.
Well, David, you know your business. Michael, he's pretty astute.
Yeah, he's pretty well informed about his topic.
So that's what George Norrie said about me. He's pretty astute, but, not when I criticize L.A. Marzulli and Michael Tellinger for what they say, okay, which is wrong. Simple as that. And I'm doing this in response. A couple of the subs had asked me to talk about it because I mention these shows often. And here they are right here. And I'll try to post them in the description over here so you guys can listen to them. I make a fool of Dr. Ken Fader. Make a fool of this guy. And the one with Michael Cremo was just great. Michael Cremo asked me what I thought about what was going on with the hybrid type giant hybrids in North America. So, okay, just letting you know. Okay, so it's all about this giant femur. So this guy, Professor Francis Stackford, shows Michael Tellinger friends rarely seen part of the upper leg bone, which would have stood about 12 feet or 3.5 meters tall. Okay, this is 12 feet tall, humanoid type people, in their estimate of people who study these things say that they weighed up to like 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Okay, if you're weighing that much, and the average stone blocks at the pyramid, the Giza pyramid, the Khufu pyramid, are 2.3 tons. Okay. All right, that's the average size of them. And we know today we design stone block, whatever it is, ergonomically to fit us and how we build things. Okay, whether it be a one-man job, two-man job, or a job done by a certain kind of machinery, we design all these things to fit to a particular purpose of what we're doing. And this people have the same intelligence for the past 200,000 years. So look, if they were doing it that way, and they have these people of this immense size and strength, what do you need all these contraptions and ramps? And if you just lift up the block with a couple of your buddies and put it right where you need to put it, okay? Because these people were strong for their size and everything. It was always test of strength. Okay, if they looked at like anything like the chiefs of the Fiji Islands, they would easily lift those blocks if they were 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. Okay, giants built all these megalithic things. It's a lot easier for them, even if they built contraptions that would suit their size. Okay, they would be able to do these things with those particular contraptions. But we keep trying to think about how we did it, and we didn't do it. These giant peoples did it. Taking credit for something that we didn't do and trying to figure out how we did is all a big waste of time. Instead of trying to think about the world of the giants that existed in the past, obviously, and all sorts of size people. But they screwing around with genetics in the past, and corn is clear evidence of it, just clear as day evidence of more advanced technologically civilization existing in the past. Just straight in your face, and people can't get around it because their minds are all warped with all sorts of brainwashing and propaganda. You can't think about it that way. So I talk about Michael Tellinger's stuff down there in South Africa, and I just want to mention all that stuff because I had it out with Michael Tellinger on there. And then Nori invited him back like a couple of weeks later to clear because I ruined the whole show for him. I'm sorry about that, but hey, baby, this is how it goes, man. You want to hear the truth? This is where you're going to get it. And it's tough noogies. That's it, Mike. I like you, buddy, but can't go around saying South Africa's the biggest area, largest area of ancient stone constructions in the world because it's not. It's the northeastern part of North America, buddy. Get it through your head. And then when he came back to the show 2 weeks later, he's like, yeah, you just totally talked about northeastern North America and how great and terrific and wonderful it was. So he had to get it straight, I guess. It was on his mind, I suppose. And this giant footprint here, largest human footprint, I think on the cover of the video for my video covering the coast to coast segment there where I called in with Michael Tellinger, I just showed Michael Tellinger standing next to this footprint. Picture of him. In South Africa, a giant footprint of a woman measuring over 4 feet long has been reported, pointing to the probability of this being a female human-like species foot. Proportionally, the two-legged being would need to be some 30 feet tall. The local African people commonly refer to this as a highly revered and sacred site. Okay, yeah, well, I would imagine so. You see something like that, and it certainly does. Certainly does look like a giant footprint, although I only see like 4 toes or whatever. But you know, it might be. It's hard to say. It would have to be examined more scientifically. You have to get like a cross section and measure it, and all the sort of scientific work done to see what the structure of the foot and the pressure it put on the stone. If the stone was soft at one time, could tell them everything. If they could get a cross section of it, they can't. So I don't know, but it's awfully big. We're talking about a big, huge, being there. They were throwing around stone. We're talking about the ones in Russia now, which are just absolutely gigantic. That they show there, these just huge blocks like the ones there in at the Trillathon there. Just amazing size stuff. I mean, maybe these giant guys were moving all that stuff around. I don't know. Seems like it. illustrating the size between ancient and modern man. An 8-foot giant from South Africa. And here's some illustration that they imagine of one of these guys. It says here, this drawing shows the difference to the sizes between a normal man of today and the primitive giant whose bones were discovered in South Africa. So the drawing shows the difference size between a normal man of today and a primitive giant whose bones were found in South Africa. And he doesn't know the source of the illustration. The bones of an 8-foot prehistoric giant found near Pretoria, and I think 1928-29. The Ogden Standard Examiner, March 17, 1929, so 20th century. So one of my favorite search sites only goes up to 1922. So 1929, what I need access to is missing. From what I read, there's more information in this edition on giant humans and giant animals as well. I'm curious as to why this was taken away. It seems sometimes that editions and pages that I need are frequently missing or dead scans, double prints, etc. I did a search and found it on a paid site. I believe this comes from page 32, and there's a lot more story that I would like to add to this post once I can access it. Not yet, but too bad. I'd like to hear more about it. Botswana giant hand axe, and these hand axes are just absolutely gigantic. You see the guy's hand right there. These things are huge. Who's throwing this thing around? Below, a man holds one of the largest of the African axes. Giant African lake basin is providing information about possible migration routes and hunting practices of early humans in the Middle and Late Stone Age periods between 150,000 and 10,000 years ago. Oxford University researchers have unearthed new evidence from the lake basin in Botswana that suggests that the region was much drier and wetter than it is today. These have documented thousands of stone tools on a lake bed, which sheds new light on how humans in Africa adapted to several substantial climate change events during the period that coincided with the last ice age in Europe, which is all baloney. And they talk about, they talk about all this stuff here. And their research was found by discovering the first, which are believed to be the world's largest stone tools on the bed of the lake. Although the first find was made in the 1990s, the discovery of 4 giant axes had not been scientifically reported until now. 4 giant stone hand axes measuring over 30 centimeters long and of uncertain age were recovered from the lake basin. Equally remarkable is that the dry lake floor where they were found is also littered with tens of thousands of other small stone age tools and flakes, the researchers report. And one of the reasons they find it remarkable, and C.W. Serpent made mention of this in his book, The First American, is that they believed at one time that these things were so precious, these flaked, type weapons and whatnot, this type of style weapon was so precious to them they couldn't afford to lose all these things because it took them so long to make these flint weapons. So what Saram found out was that somebody who was researching into these things found out that these flint weapons could be made in a very short period of time, within minutes. Very good ones can be made within minutes. It doesn't take a long period of time. So all these things, we think about these things that they put forth, again, it's more baloney. You just hear more and more mistakes with all these things, and this is what they've compiled up into what they call a history, which is just a bunch of crap. All right. So, and you're talking about humans. Well, people who are throwing around these type of giant weapons or tools are probably not human beings. And if they are, they're some sort of ancestor of human beings and probably part of the missing DNA or the unknown DNA or the mystery DNA or the ghost DNA. Or they mention all these terms to quote these things. Swartkrans, giant ape or giant man. So again, with the giant ape type thing, they're always saying ape because they can't figure out these configurations of skulls. Keep on talking about these skulls and you can't understand the configurations of these skulls. Oh, I see a kitty cat here. And It's just another type of humanoid or hominid of the past with a different kind of skull configuration. Berkeley, California. South Africa has yielded the bones of another ape man, larger than the recently discovered giant man of Java, who must have stood 9 feet tall. So pay attention to that in Java there. In the University of California announced that fossil remains of the new type were found in a limestone cave near Swartkrans, Africa, by Dr. Robert Broom, South African paleontologist of the Transvaal Museum. Details of the discovery were cabled to Wendell Phillips, leader of the university's African expedition operating near Johannesburg. Phillips has returned to the Berkeley campus. Dr. Broom said, on the evidence to date, we can say that a new type of ape man has been discovered, larger than those previously known. Already conclusive evidence has been obtained that these ape men are alike and are probably ancestral to man and not closely related to living apes. He said the new find would be called Swartkrans man. So here is yet another type to be, categorized into these giant humanoid hominid creature type things that are all around the world. And we've heard all the reports and accounts of it. Can't you get it through your thick heads? I mean, these scientists are just, obtuse, and you have all this evidence, yet, there's just no hypothesis directed towards any possibility of there being some sort of different kind of past. And you can even imagine, again, I'm just always going back to corn and what we think are domesticated animals and other anomalous things, including the cryptids, could all possibly, including us, be biologically engineered organisms, from the past, from a more advanced civilization. Just, we can't duplicate corn today. If we could, we would. Wouldn't we make any sort of superfood out of some blade of grass somewhere, which is what they say corn is derived from, or something like that? Wouldn't we do it today if we could do it? We can't do it. So how did caveman do? You're gonna plant a crop. You're caveman, there's saber-toothed tigers all around and whatnot. You're planting crops that have no yield. You're starving and everything. You're going to devote all this time and energy and with planting crops with the hopes of a yield someday, maybe hundreds of years in the future or something like that, and protect this the whole time. Devote your whole energy to this. It's just so incredulous. It's ridiculous. Okay, corn is impossible. It's an impossible plant. An impossible vegetable, just impossible. Just clear evidence of a more advanced civilization in the past. Clear as day. 10-foot skeleton. Fine skeleton of man 10 feet tall, Johannesburg, South Africa. Again, 10 feet tall man building pyramids. Real good and easy for them, I would imagine. Okay, all the block that we designed today for us today is for our ergonomic purposes. An old block in the past was designed for specific use in mind. However, it was managed, even with some kind of contraptions or what, but on a scale much larger than we can think of, our own scale, off our scale. That's why we can't think of how they did it. Or it remains a mystery as to how they did it. The skeleton man, who is 10 feet tall when alive, has been dug up 10 miles from here. It is thought that the man was a Kafir. Some of these grow to great heights, but never has one been seen so tall or a skeleton of such height been found. And when was this from? It doesn't date it here, but it gives the account in the paper here. It might be a modern 20th century article here. 10 feet tall man, again, in another place on this planet. Giant skeleton found. Evidence of a mighty death battle in the dim past between an extinct giant buffalo and a most powerful giant-like primitive man was recently found by road makers in a quarry at Springwood Flats, north of Pretoria. Shattered bones of a man and beast were lying together in the same strata. The bones are fossilized and have all been sent to the Transvaal Museum, where the director, Dr. Swistra, declares that discovery, according to the Johannesburg correspondent of the London Morning Post, the most important yet made regarding primitive man in South America, for the man is undoubtedly older than the famous Boskop skull. Most of the man's skull and the majority of the longer bones and parts of the hands have been recovered. The buffalo remains also indicate that it died a violent death. The director states that most probable the hunter and the hunted died together. The man is officially described as a powerful, large-sized man, not closely related to any Negroid races. The buffalo can be estimated by measurements between the horns to measure nearly 11 feet. It's gigantic buffalo, like there are gigantic bison here in North America, and their smaller counterparts that could cope with a new gravity, a new Earth, after some incredible catastrophe, which they mistake as the Ice Age, with all this stone moving around all over the place, hundreds and thousands of miles from where it originates from. That could be the only reason, right? Giant ice sheets over the Earth, but something else might have occurred that they're not acknowledging. But there seems to be much evidence of it. But they have to stick to the narrative. All narratives must be stuck to. Limpopo, ancient giant footprint. His mark, footprint in stone, ancient giant. News Special Cape Town Wednesday. An Italian scientific expedition has returned to Bulawayo with a report of having found an imprint on a stone in Limpopo of an enormous human foot. Professor Cipriani states that the imprint was made originally in soft ground, and he had traced several of such imprints, four of which were a species of unknown man, showing anthropoidic tendencies. The distance from heel to toe was 34 centimeters, the greatest breadth 14 centimeters. They were distinctly of a type of man who was probably responsible for the huge stone axes found in Africa, which have hitherto baffled scientists. More giant stone axes, more footprints found, giant footprints found, probably from the same eras of these other footprints found around his planet, where something might have happened on his planet to cause these geographic, geological conditions in these geographies where it would allow for these things to occur. And it seems, worldwide, not only in, these certain places. So this is another article that goes up the Boskop giant skull, and it's just Chris Leslie commenting about these things. Okay, it's like the world's largest skull here, but it's actually not. This is from I'm trying to think, Tanzania, I believe, and Bodo Sports, the biggest face, or Ethiopia, I think. East Africa, they say here. Bodo Sports' biggest face known in the human fossil record. Paleontologist Burhane Asfar displaying the immense Bodo cranium, with one of the largest faces in the fossil record. This gigantic skull is the largest known in human history, while only a partial cranium, the point of Bodo in East Africa, possesses the largest face of any hominin yet recorded. Its face is the largest among all fossil hominids. The Bodo cranium is a fossil that was found by members of an expedition led by John Kalb in 1976 at Bododar, Awash River Valley of Ethiopia. The initial discovery was by Alamehu Asfar and Charles Smart, a lower face. 2 weeks later, Paul Whitehead and Craig Wood found the upper portion of the face. The skull is classified as Homo heidelbergensis, Homo rhodesiensis. The cranium has an unusual appearance, which has led debates over its taxonomy. So, again, with the possible um, you know ape-like appearance. That's why they're questioning the simian type appearance. That's why they're questioning the taxonomy of it. But who knows what kind of creature it was? All sorts of strange creatures existed in the early Holocene and the late Paleolithic, the late Pleistocene period. All kinds of weird animals existed that did not have smaller counterparts necessarily and went completely extinct. And in other cases, giant animals that did have smaller counterparts that seemed similar, quite similar, or almost identical to them, had smaller counterparts. Those ones survived into some new Earth after some cataclysm occurred or whatever, and these giant ones died off, similar to the giants devolving over time and interbreeding as once they reached a certain size, were able to interbreed with regular sized humans, probably woman to giant woman to average sized man, because the other way around, the pregnancy would not seem to be. This is my own theory, okay, my own hypothesis. I'm proud to say, so don't take it as a fact, but I'm just saying that it seems to be the other way around, and a normal sized man would have, you know, um, offspring with female giant would seem more viable pregnancy than the other way around. Giant male to average size human, Homo sapien female would not be a viable pregnancy. So it probably was the other way around. But I'm just saying it seems more likely for survivable pregnancies. Okay, so all things to think about here, and this giant skull is just huge here, and the face is quite forbidding there, but all these things to be found in Africa. Again, so many, like similar to North America, and don't I'm sure there were many more accounts from Africa, but it seems to be that you know there's just as many of these odd type skeletal and skull type giant humanoids in Africa as there are any place in the world as we know so far. And it doesn't end there. Similar to the elongated skull types and everything, just you think about all these things: elongated skull types, giants with odd horn skulls, childlike faces, and giant, huge, bowl-like craniums, ball-like craniums, vaulted craniums, elongated, dolichocephalic, brachiocephalic, all this stuff. You have to think about a past that is just so amazing and incredible that no Nephilim stories or any Anunnaki stories can even cover the bases on what could have gone on in the past. Okay, even if that were true, it's only a small segment of the story. So many eons and ages passed with these strange hominid and humanoid creatures existing on this planet. Completely different past with a more advanced civilization, weird humanoids, just in your wildest fantasies you couldn't understand it, and that's where Tolkien comes into it. But go for a more advanced technologically civilization than what even Tolkien came up with. All right. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I mean, it's very interesting. Again, nowhere on this planet so far is there anywhere where giants don't exist. So, I mean, think about it. All right. Anyway, hit the like button, guys, if you like the video, and please do subscribe. We just have a very interesting take on all of the different things about the giant humanoids of the past, and you can only hear about it here on this channel. All right, guys. Anyway, Bugcat7 signing out. Peace.